Katharine Birbalsingh is known as England's strictest teacher. Why? The discipline she instills in pupils can include detention for forgetting a pen, moving between classrooms in silence and being required to chant inspirational poems during the assembly. In isolation may seem quite draconian, but together they have led to an impressive results.
They certainly have. Such are her accomplishments. She has now been announced as the new social mobility czar. But what does that actually mean? Well, I'm glad to say Katharine joins us now to help us find out. So that is, not only is it a big title, it's also a big sort of mission. What are you hoping to achieve being the social mobility czar?
Well, there are three areas that I'm interested in, really. One, obviously, education. I think that schools enable children to change their stars, is what I always say, as long as what's happening in the school are the right sorts of things. I'm also interested in families and what we're doing as adults in the home. I think it's important for children to be surrounded by a certain determination where adults are holding their standards really high, not just at school, but also at home. And it's quite difficult, I think, bringing children up in this day and age of smartphones and screen time, and you're not quite sure what your child is up to on there and how they might be led astray. So I'd like to shed some light on that. And then thirdly, the other side. So apprenticeships, routes into work, and how we can improve that for young people. Because at the moment, there are systems, I just don't think they're as clear as they can be.
Well, Katharine, all of that to me sounds very sort of practical and common sense, schools, families and routes into work. But it seems that you've taken sort of a bit of flack, draconian, too much discipline. But some of us would say, isn't that lacking at the moment?
Yeah. The thing that I think people think is, they say, you're the strictest teacher, you must be the meanest teacher. But actually, I would say that being strict is all about love. It's hard to hold the line with children, much easier to try and be their friend and to give them what they want, because in the moment it quietens them down or it just sort of leaves you alone. But actually, the hard route is to hold your standards high and say, no, actually, I want you to do that homework and you're going to do it well. Oh, no, I need you to do it again. Oh, no, actually, I need you to say please before I give you the chocolate bar, because otherwise, if I never insist on you saying please, you'll never learn how to do so. So it's about seeing the long term. And, I'm in school, senior team meeting every morning at 7 a.m. It's not because I hate children that I do that. It's because I love them. And it's hard to hold the line for parents and teachers. But we must do it to help them. It's our role as adults to scaffold them and support them so that eventually when they're 16, 18, we can say, off you go, little birdie, off you go and fly, because I've given you all the tools that you need to make yourself successful and happy in life.
Katharine, hearing your words makes my heart sing. So I was a primary school teacher and I changed my career nearly 20 years ago. And what you're saying is just so true. Almost 20 years ago, things had changed and they'd become very difficult in teaching. I was known as the strictest teacher in my school, and when children misbehaved, they would be sent to my class because I was the strictest. And I can say, as a mother of four and as having been a teacher, discipline is the most important thing, and good manners are the most important things. And yet we got to a stage whilst teaching that these were just completely overlooked. So hearing you now, honestly, it's such a breath of fresh air. And what blows my mind is that you had to take a lot of flack before you got the respect that you truly deserve. How did you feel when you were kind of fighting through that?
Yeah, well, it is difficult. I still get flack nowadays, actually. but I always remember the children and what I'm doing this for. And I know how much they thrive in an environment which is filled with love, but standards are high. What I always say to the naughty child who's trying to get away with something is, I'm not going to drop my standards for you. I'm not going to expect more of these other children over here, which is often what happens, and often with the most disadvantaged children, because well-meaning people think to themselves, well, he's got a difficult life at home, or he's having trouble at the moment. I can't really expect him to do his homework. I can't expect him to be polite right now. But the thing is that if you keep dropping your standards all the time for him, in the end, who loses out? He does. Because when he goes off into life, Well, he doesn't know how to say please and thank you. He doesn't know how to look somebody in the eye and shake their hand and make it a first impression when he goes to that interview. And it's so important for all the adults in his life, both at home and at school, to keep those standards high, do what's difficult. We always say at school, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult, you do the right thing. And that's for us to model as adults so that children can copy us and that they'll be happy doing so. That's the thing we need to convince everybody of. Doing what's hard in the end gives us long-term happiness.
And I truly believe in social mobility, that all people from all backgrounds can achieve if they're given the right support and education and opportunities, which is what you're doing. But this is setting expectations for young people from all backgrounds, and that's what I like to hear you talk about. What are those expectations for all children from all backgrounds?
Well, for instance, one of the things that I'd really love a campaign on is smartphones. Too often you sit on the tube and you see children, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds with a smartphone in their hands. And I know why the parents do it. It seems sensible. Why not give them a smartphone? But what they don't understand is that when they're then later trying to get their child to read, a book cannot compete with a smartphone. A book is flat and black and white. A smartphone has lots of colors and explosions and things that change quickly. And so later when the child then struggles to read, the parent might think, oh, he's just never really liked reading. When in actual fact, the truth is that it's because he spent too much time on that smartphone. And because all of this technology is so new, the parents don't necessarily realize. And often the children are so much further ahead in terms of their understanding of technology. So that's one big thing that I'd like to do, is try and get information out there to families and to schools so that we know what we're dealing with when it comes to this technology, which is great. I'm not saying it's bad. You know, at our school, we're constantly communicating via technology, the teachers, but we have to be cautious and to think very carefully about what we allow our children to do and what we try and protect them from.
Katharine, I think you're being very gracious there when you say you understand why parents give their phones, their kids smartphones. I think that's very gracious. But my thing is, a lot of it is just very, very lazy parenting. I see it all the time. You see it where parents just can't be bothered to speak to their children. They can't be bothered to interact with them, so they just palm them off with some gadget so they can just focus on that. So, I mean, it's two-handed, isn't it? Some parents just don't understand the damage that's being done, and secondly, some do understand, and really you have to step up. If you're going to be a parent, you have to take the lead and parent, not just fob them off.
I think I work with a lot of children doing career advice and supporting them, and what I've noticed through this gadgetry you're talking about is the lack of attention, the ability for children to focus. And I guess if you're teaching children, you've got to make sure that they're listening, they're focusing. So how are you sort of getting that into your school? What are you having to do with your pupils to make sure that they are totally focused for a full lesson?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think when people say I'm strict, what they really mean is that I'm consistent. And I make sure that all of our staff at school are consistent. So a phrase we use is tracking me. And we all use that phrase. And when the teachers say tracking me, the children know we want their eyes on us. And when everybody is using that same language, the children immediately know, oh, this is what the teacher wants. Sometimes, especially for children who have special needs and so on, if there is lots of different things going on in different classrooms, different ways of talking and so on, and requesting something from them, then they can get confused. Whereas if you have consistency in your expectations, sometimes in your language, in the way that the room looks, all of our classrooms, for instance, have desks in rows that are facing the teacher for the teacher to be able to lead the learning. And if there is that predictability, that is scaffolding for a child to then allow him to be creative and to think for himself. And that's the difficulty. People sort of think, oh no, we need lots of chaos in order for them to think. And actually it's the opposite. What you need is lots of order and structure. And that gives them the security that they need to be creative and to think outside the box. And that's just really about getting that word out, letting people know this stuff, not just in the classroom, but at home as well. If you have dinner at the same time every evening and bath time at the same time, and if you have the same expectations, children are more likely to deliver for you, because children like that predictability. It's unpredictability and inconsistency that children can struggle with. So, if a child comes from a split home, for instance, one way of supporting the child through that is for both mum and dad in separate homes to have very consistent routines. And then the child is well supported through that kind of breakup. There's so many things like that I want to kind of get that information out to try and help people, because I know what you're saying about lazy parenting. I understand that, but I also get that parents are exhausted. They come home from work, they just think, oh gosh, and they don't realize the damage they might be doing by handing that smartphone to their child.
I totally agree with you. I think that structure, that discipline, knowing the teacher is in charge and you are there to listen, that's an authoritative figure and you're learning on your way up. But I think, and I guess this is our final question, though we could speak to you all day, and this is lockdown has caused huge disruption. Lockdown has stopped that discipline, stopping that learning. Now, for me, I'd never want to see another lockdown, because I think it was the poorest children, in a way, the most disadvantaged children who suffered the most. And I guess it's how you're going to deal with that, whether it's catch-up or whether it's going forward, protecting your pupils.
Yes. Well, I could talk to you for 3 hours just about that. The fact is, for instance, I know why government did it. They got laptops out to everybody because the idea was children need to access learning online. And I'm not blaming them. But then what we don't consider is, what else are they accessing online? Is the laptop actually taking them away from their work in many ways because they're too busy on Snapchat and Instagram? This kind of thing is never spoken about, and we need to shed a light onto it. And yes, disadvantaged children were massively affected during lockdown. Catch up now. The best thing we could do is to get behavior to be brilliant in all of our schools. And if we could do that, which means being strict, it means being consistent with all of our teachers and all of our head teachers. If we could do that, my goodness, would you see those kids catch up? So that's the sort of thing that we need to see, and we need to all kind of buy into. And I think sometimes we can underestimate just how poor some behavior can be all over the place, really.